button was like not showing up, so now we got it.
Oh, I see it on the corner.
Okay.
Okay. Okay, there we go.
Let's see. Let's see what's going on. It says Paula Ware is in the waiting room. Do you know Paula?
Paula where?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Okay, let's not let him in.
Oh, yeah. We got one person waiting.
Okay. Cool. So we'll get started in just a second. Let me make sure this is recording. Okay. Cool. Let me see if I can monitor the questions as well. The comments. Look cool. Okay, yeah, we're gonna get started, y'all. I have a few announcements. We have 2 shows coming up. We have Panhandle Protest that's coming up on the 12th of February through March 5th. And so that's basically a compile of protest signs from local activists and artists, and also videos about protests and what the term protest means. And then we also have the show from Jane Lindsay called Injustice for All. Jane Lindsay's currently living in Post, Texas, and worked in Lubbock, Texas, and she'll have a bunch of photographs up, and we'll talk more about it later because it'll be a really good show and our first solo and group show. So we're gonna get started with everything else. I think that's the only announcements we have for the art house. We'll probably be closed tomorrow for renovation, so if any of y'all stop by, might look like a mess. And then y'all can also drop off food to the Lubbock Community Fridge 24/7. We're still accepting non-perishables, water, fruits and vegetables, and just donate to East Lubbock Art House. So tonight we have Bryan K. Hotchkins, Dr. Bryan K. Hotchkins. So I'm gonna let him introduce himself, and then we're gonna get into some questions and go back and forth. So just have a nice conversation. If you have any questions, comments, leave them in the comment section of the video and we'll get started. So Bryan, if you'd like to introduce yourself, tell people how you ended up in Lubbock, why you're staying in Lubbock.
So my name is Dr. Bryan Keith Hotchkins, son of Edie and James Hotchkins. I am a professor at Texas Tech University College of Ed. And so the research that I do examines how people of African descent experience racialized trauma in organizational settings, right, due to climate, context, and culture. And so I arrived here 2016. Yeah, 2016. Moved here from Salt Lake City. So my family and I lived in Salt Lake City from 2008 to 2016. So I was at the University of Utah prior to arriving here. And so, yeah, I'm from Oklahoma City, born and raised. And yeah, I'm here. My PhD is in educational leadership and policy. And so when you hit me and were like, yeah, I want to have a discussion about Black futures, I was like, oh, it's Black History Month. I'm blackity black. Let's get it done.
Cool. And then I'll let everyone know. So these talks were basically inspired by, it's Black History Month, but also it feels like, and I could tell from other people, like there's so much focus on Black history and Black people just in February. And I bought this book called Black Futures. So if y'all are interested in some really good literature, this book is just perfect. It's by an artist curator her name is Kimberly Drew and Jenna Wortham. And I learned about Kimberly Drew. She had I guess it was Tumblr page, an Instagram page where she posts about Black artists and Black people every day. So she's posted about, I don't know, just like, I think 1 million people so far on the internet. So she's just this big ecosystem of curating Blackness. So just going into that, you can kind of skip around. I know you talked about where you're from. So how do you compare where you're from to being in Lubbock, Texas?
So Oklahoma City, so the state of Oklahoma, just a little known history fact. state of Oklahoma is the only state that was given away in a land run, right? And so essentially they just said, we're going to, on this date, we're going to sound the alarm, and wherever you stick your stake, you get a 2 acreage land block, right? And so if you're connected to the University of Oklahoma, so I graduated from there. The fight song call is Boomer Sooner, right? And so persons who went and took their land before the timeline were called Sooners, and the ones that took it after were called Boomers because they were in the land boom, hence the term Boomer Sooner, right? And so from I want to say 18 maybe 72. If I'm wrong, please forgive me. Tallahassee was the first black town that was created. Yeah, I believe so. And so between that time and I want to say like 1932, there were like 56 historic black towns created in Oklahoma. And so because Oklahoma also participated so if people of indigenous descent were relocated, right, from the East Coast, from several places in the country to Oklahoma. Early on, before Oklahoma had statehood, it was territorial country. And so it was a third white, a third persons of African descent, and a third indigenous. And so Oklahoma, I grew up in a space where Oklahoma it's diverse, right? In a sense that indigenous history and culture is there. So I went to powwows, I grew up going to rodeos. And so it's similar to Lubbock. It's just more populous, right? So Oklahoma City is probably 1.5 million in Oklahoma City. Lubbock is about around 250,000. And so this it's more populous. And so, it's all my family is there. And so it's a different type of environment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But similar.
Yeah, I did not know that about Oklahoma. I did not know that. So I learned some history today. So, and then also I want to talk to you about like how you got started in your career and how that process through going in school and secondary education, how that all started. And just, did you have somebody that kind of guided you along the way? Did you have like mentors or family members that were like, you need to go to college, or like, this is the process that you do?
Right. And so for me, I'm first generation college going, right? And so there are 5 Marines in my family. One of those, who is deceased now, my Uncle Freddie, went to Vietnam, Purple Heart. And so when I was at John Marshall High School, I graduated, I was like 18th in my class. And so I wanted to be a Marine. And I was like, I want to, fight for the country like you did. And, Uncle Freddie, he was like, well, you can go to college if you want to. So go ahead and go. I went to the Marine Corps because I couldn't go to college. And you can, so go ahead and go. And so I ended up going to Southern Methodist University in Dallas, Texas, small private university. You may have heard of it before. So I went there, graduated in 4 years. That's where I joined my fraternity, Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated. So I went there. Then after I graduated, so my undergraduate degree is in communications, public relations. So after there, I went to Georgia for a little bit, and then I came back to Oklahoma. And so I met my wife there, Nedra Hotchkins. And so at the time, I was working for the Oklahoma Tourism Department. And so, excuse me, that's part of the reason why I know so much about Oklahoma history. I was in charge of placing, I guess, chronicling Black history in Oklahoma, right? And so wherever we could create a situation where people would get on tour buses. So I conducted tours where people would get on tour buses and they would come to the Black towns. They would go to a couple of Black towns, go to Tulsa and learn about, Black Wall Street, the 1921 race riot. And so while I was there, I was thinking, I had the itch, the intellectual itch. And I was like, I want to get a degree, another one. I need another degree, right? And so I was like, I'll go to University of Oklahoma. So I got my master's in human relations in the University of Oklahoma. And so after that, I ended up at Oklahoma State University, where I had a job. I was in arts and sciences. I was a coordinator of some programs for students. Mm-hmm. And then as I was around people in that environment, I would meet different people who had PhDs, right? And I met a couple of other persons. Then came across this brother named Harlan Ballard, And so he's my frat brother. And he was currently, at the time, it was 20, he graduated in 2007. He was at the University of Oklahoma in their adult and higher ed program. And that was really the first time I thought to myself, I could be a professor. Because I didn't grow up thinking that I wanted to be one. But after working with him on his dissertation, I was bitten by the bug, and I was like, okay, I'll apply to the University of Oklahoma for a PhD, but they had a memoriam, and they didn't have, they wouldn't let people apply because they had a situation where a lot of people had defended their proposal but not graduated yet, and so they said we're gonna shut the program down for a year. Nobody can come in, so I couldn't come in, and so I applied at the University of Utah the next year. And so I was admitted at the University of Utah, educational leadership and policy. And so, I moved my whole family to Salt Lake City, right? And so I remember my parents, my mother in particular was like, man, how many Black people's in Utah? Like 11 or 12? And I was like, oh, well, I don't know. I'll go out there first. So the first semester I went out, I got admitted in the program, education leadership and policy, and I went out by myself the first semester. And so it was unlike anything I'd ever seen before. I'd never been in a mountainous region of the country. And so in Salt Lake City, it snows like 6 months out the year. And so it was a different cultural experience because there were Mormons there. I'd never met Mormons before, and I'd never been around Pacific Islander people. So I hadn't interacted with Samoans, Tongans, or Fijians either. Mm-hmm. And so my family ended up coming. And so it was at the time, so my wife and I, so while I was there, it took me 5 years to get my PhD, and it took her 4 years to get her undergraduate and her master's in education, leadership, and policy. And so it was a cultural and intellectual immersion, right? Like we moved as a unit. So we would take the kids with us to go study 10 hours, and the kids, because they were young then. So we'd all be in the library, pack lunch, pack dinner, and we all studying. And so I was only the third Black person to graduate from that program. Wow. Yeah, with a PhD. And so it was I was the only Black person in my program pursuing a PhD at the time when I started in 2008. And so it was difficult. It was, so just imagine this. So you have 100 ergs of energy to expend every day, right? Mm-hmm. And so if you have to expend 30 of those dealing with racism or racist interactions or anxiety from anticipation of racial interaction, then you're not going to be as focused. You only got 70 ergs left to study, right, and perform. And so, yeah, it was difficult for us to finish, but, we finished. I used to say this to people. They would laugh at me. I say, I'm only leaving Utah one of two ways, as Dr. Hotchkins or in a pine box. I'll say that all the time. And so we graduated. I applied to Texas Tech. And so came here to do critical work, right? To examine how people of African descent navigate the geographies of racism. I do critical race theory work. I mean, previously we had, when President Trump issued the executive order against race and stereotyping, right? In one of his press conferences, he specifically mentioned critical race theory. And I was like, oh, that's it. It's only about 100 of us in the country that do this work. And so he's given us a platform, right, to have discussions about it. And so, yeah, came here to do that work. And so I'm all about transforming the world and making it a better place that is anti-racist. That's my goal.
Yeah. So with your background in critical race theory, do you feel like you use any of that knowledge or just any of that within like the Black communities in Lubbock, like East Lubbock, that's predominantly, well, not predominantly Black, actually, it's predominantly Hispanic, Latinx, but it's mostly, that's the largest population of Black people in the community in, Lubbock County. Do you feel like you use any of that to kind of connect with that community, or is it just an overall sense that you use your background and knowledge?
Right, it's also both and, right? And so for instance, I divide my 2020 between pre-COVID and post-George Floyd, right? And so once George Floyd was murdered, God rest his soul, I sat down and had a conversation with my family about what are we going to do? How are we going to use our knowledge to teach subsequent generations of people to not take Black life, right? Mm-hmm. And so my wife and I spent the summer putting this curriculum together for what ended up being our how to reverse racism training, right? And so it's 12 hours of knowledge about how do we move a person from not racist to anti-racist. And when we do that, how does the knowledge that we taught them, how is that applied in the organizations that they work in, right? To examine policies, practices, and programs to make those anti-racist, right? And so the first group of, I don't know if you're familiar with Cicely Alexander. Mm-hmm. So she's executive principal of the Lubbock Partnership Network. And so we had a conversation shortly after, it might have been June, about us implementing our training with her 4 schools, right? And so we started our program with them in, I want to say September. And so each of those schools has a principal and then maybe 13 to 15 participants, so close to 90 people. And so we're almost done with our training now. But that is one way where critical thought, right? So critical race theory is really about emancipation. It's about emancipation from systems of oppression, right? That marginalize, silence, subjugate historically people of color, right? In this instance, Black people, as it relates to how Derek Bell has framed it as critical race theory. And so the work that we're doing is teaching those people, how to go inside and outside of the workplace to identify and dismantle those systems of oppression. And so because some of those people live in east side of Lubbock, right, it looks a little different about how they can apply it. And plus, because I'm a member of the 100 Black Men, I had through my podcast, a Facade podcast in the summer. So before COVID season happened, I was doing some collaborations with them around where we brought young men of color who went high school to the barbershop and had some discussions about, college trajectories, about consent when dating girls, and then about what does it mean to be Black in Lubbock. And so my critical race theory work is centered in everything that I do, whether it is explicit or not. Like I make sure that it unfurls in ways that connects people and shows people how to take these concepts and apply them in the real world.
I think that's so awesome. And I've seen a lot, like all of your advertisements for the training. Would you say it would just be for schools, or who else do you have the training for? Or who else can, bring the training into their workplace or schools?
Right. So we just started working with Texas Wesleyan University, and we're set to do some training with the Lubbock Police Department in March. And so we have some areas of interest, right? We work with Redlands College in California. And so we're getting ready to also onboard Nevada State College. And so, and we're working with the Oklahoma State Department of Education, right? And so we're reaching out, right? The program is growing because there's a need, right? To know how to not harm people, right? I was thinking about how my wife and I were talking about kingdom building and what is our role in doing God's work, right? And so I was like, you know what it is, because racism is a sin, because racism is based on hate. The work that we do teaches you how to reverse racism or eliminate it because it's anti-racist. And so if we're teaching people how to be anti-racist, they're not being sinful and hateful by being racist, and that's God's work. And so, it's for everyone. If your organization is interested in bringing us in for the training, then we work with nonprofit organizations, government municipalities, companies, or schools, school systems. Mostly the focus now is schools because that's what we're mostly connected with.
Okay, cool. That's good to know. And so to kind of switch it over, but to still connect with what we're doing, just want to talk to you about like what Black History Month means to you. Like we all know what Black History Month is, but specifically like with the social and political climate going on, like what are you doing with this Black History Month? Are you just not talking about it? Or like, what are you doing to kind of, educate well-meaning white people and not well-meaning white people as well?
Right. And so I think this specific Black History Month, because of COVID, I'm embracing it differently, right? Like one thing COVID has taught me is about my mortality. Like my life ain't promised. I mean, I always knew it, but just the amount of deaths that I've seen in the Black community specifically, disproportionately, right? That I'm mindful of being alive and celebrating the legacy of the people that I come from. So this Black History Month is special, you know, because when I saw, you know, Cicely Tyson died, and I was like, you know, Hank Aaron, and I was just like, man, there's just a list of Black people that are no longer with us. It got me thinking, okay, you know, we don't have Luther Vandross, we don't have Whitney Houston, we don't have Michael Jackson, we don't have Prince, and just the list goes on and on and on, right? And so I'm mindful that I'm purposefully watching what is happening on television, right? About how Black people are being treated, how we're being not necessarily respected, because I don't think historically Black culture or people have been respected, right, in the United States. But it's just, I'm watching, I spend a lot of time on Netflix. It's a lot of Black content out there, right? It's a lot of Black content to absorb. There are a lot of people that have Black businesses that sell merch, you know, and it just depends on how you want to give back. You know, on my social media, I try to retweet or post something from a Black creative, try to buy something from a Black business in ways that are supportive. And so, you know, as it relates to well-meaning white people, right? And so well-meaning, like what is that to you? How do you define that? What does that mean?
Like well-meaning is people that are trying to be anti-racist. Like it's the ones that, like, if you tell them, like if you were to call them out on something that's seemingly racist, they would be the ones that would say, you know, like, I'm sorry. They would be the ones that listen. They wouldn't be the ones that would say, I don't think that's racist. They would be the ones to actually listen and comprehend. They're the ones that are, you know, they don't say, oh, I have one Black friend, like, I'm not racist because I have that Black friend, or like, you know, how can I be racist? And they're not the ones that argue with you. Similarly, they're not the Trump supporters. But yeah, so well-meaning white people, it's, you know, the ones that you can call your friends, the ones that are trying, but the ones that are not overstepping. Like, you know, they're not the ones that are trying to also educate themselves just through you when they can also use Google. I mean, that's not well-meaning when they, you know, take up your time. So.
And so it's funny that you ask. I remember, so right after George Floyd is murdered, and I wrote all the names down, the dates and times. I talked to 17 white people that they were either colleagues of mine or friends of mine, right? And we had the same overarching conversation around how do white people not practice performative solidarity, right? How do white people say, I want to take my white privilege, right? And we want to fight white supremacy, like the persons that were in the insurrection, storming the Capitol, that killed a police officer, right? And so it was, those conversations were easy to have because, like my grandmother says, those people were teachable, right? And so when a person is teachable, then you can have conversations, right? So there's no pushback. It's just there are questions around, how do I be better, right? How do I nuance what I do to help Black people? And because these people are all over the country, right, the context in which they live in is different. So we're having a nuanced conversation each phone call, right? But how do we stand up and say, you know, this is injustice and I'm not having it, right? And also, how do we had conversations around, like I say, as a person of African descent, when I go anywhere, I'm looking for sameness, right? So I'm looking for me. Where am I at? How many Black people's in this room or in this building, or deans on campuses, or principals in the school system, or firemen? Like, how many Black people are in these places? And I was telling them that as a white person, you should go into spaces looking for difference. You should be saying, why are we in a meeting with only white people? I'm not comfortable with that. Like, we need to have more diversity. We need to have more equity. We need to have more inclusion. How can I use my voice to facilitate that, right? And so once Black people come to me and say, these are the problems, if they ask me to intervene, then I will try, either with my body, with my mind, with my prayers, with my resources, right? Or if I can't, then I'll try to disrupt, right? So even if it's just a room of white people, something is said that's, you know, inappropriate or racist, they'll interject and say, hey, that's not, we shouldn't be talking like that in this space and place, right? And so those are the most of the conversations that I had with white people, just around, like, this is the generational moment for white people. When we look back 40 years from now, we'll look back and see how many white people had a meeting Like we had a talk in the Black household, right? How many white people would sit down and have a meeting and say, my white, our white as a family don't look like this, right?
Yeah.
We not this type of white. And that was part of the conversation that I had. White people would tell me, I'm not that type of white. And it just sounded different. It was the first time that I heard in my life that white people have differentiated their white from another type of white, but which is more nefarious. Like they painted as this white is more nefarious. I'm not an insurrectionist, right? I want to be anti-racist. How do you help me do that? And so those were the conversations, because something needs to be said to young white children, right? Teenagers, white students that are in college campuses, that these are the modes of righteousness that we're going to try to operate in transgenerationally, right? Because Black people should not be getting murdered, should not be getting exploited, should not be getting erased, and we're not going to participate in that. So for the most part, those are conversations I have with well-meaning white folks.
Yeah, somebody had asked me about that in this other discussion I did, and I was just like, yeah. And then to go off of that, and I guess you kind of talked about it. So what's one thing that you would like to tell well-meaning white people as well? Like if you just had one statement just that you just wanted to ingrain in them, like what is that statement?
Right. That's a good question. Oh, so I guess so if they are Christian, I would tell them, do everything that your Bible tells you to do, right? Because so it all goes back to racism being sin. Like if you're a Christian, you're not going to want to sin, right? So we all sin in our lives. We got things that we shouldn't be doing. They should be actively saying, I'm not going to commit the sin of racism. Mm-hmm. And this is how I'm not going to do it. And be in prayer about not doing it, right? In the same ways that you would do anything else, like you would pray against committing adultery, or you can pray against, you don't want to kill somebody, or you don't want to steal something, right? You don't want to be tempted to do certain things. I would hope that they would pray to not be tempted to commit the sin of racism, right? Mm-hmm. And so I guess that would be my theme. Like be in community with people of Black, Indigenous, and people of color, right? And work on you. Because I always say, if everybody that says they're Christian or Muslim, if everybody did what their scripture or their holy book said, there wouldn't be any racism or sexism, or although there wouldn't be any isms, because we'd be living righteously.
Yeah.
In my estimation, like that's the goal, right?
Mm-hmm. So, yeah, I totally agree with that. And then to go off of that, so this is kind of a no-brainer, but just what do you think it means to be Black? Do you just see it as like our skin color, hair, facial features? And also, what does it mean to be pro-Black? So it might not be the same thing to you as it is. It's not the same thing to me either. So what do you think it means to be Black and also pro-Black?
So the answer to that question is layered, right? And so I was having a conversation with some students at the beginning of the semester around, what does it mean to be free? And so for a Black person, what it means to be free, like, is nuanced, right? Like I saw a white male on campus asleep in the grass, just asleep, right? And I thought to myself, man, I don't feel comfortable enough to just be outside asleep, right? I don't want someone to see me on the ground and think that I'm trying to steal the grass and something bad happened to me.
Yeah.
I don't want to do it. I don't feel comfortable enough, right? And so what it means to be Black to me is bound in hesitation. Like we live our lives in hesitation, right? We think about, okay, can I run at dark at night? I don't know. Can I wear a hoodie in the daytime? I don't know. Can I raise my voice when I'm having a conversation with somebody and it gets testy? I don't know. As we've seen with this generation, this wave of Karens, right? Like to be Black is to be under hyper surveillance, right? Waiting for somebody to call the police on us because we outside breathing, right? So what does it mean to be free? Like is Black free? Will we ever exist in a space where we don't have to live in hesitancy? Like, so that's one part of it. And I think part of it too is this consciousness, this critical consciousness around who is Black, right? And how I construct myself in a non-deficit perspective. And so I'm mindful that internalized racism exists. And so there are, you still there?
Yeah, I'm here. I knew it was
Oh,
me. It's always my internet. It's horrible.
okay. So I think you may have heard. So last thing I said was I think it's a blackness is a state of mind too, right? It's a
Mhm.
state of critical consciousness. Like how do you see yourself as black, and how do you see everyone else who is black as black, right?
Mhm.
And so because of the diaspora, do you see Afro Latino or Latinas as black? Because they are, right? Do we see our Caribbean brothers and sisters as black, right? Because they are, right? And so it is not an Americanized experience. It's a global mindset around what it means to be black or to be of African descent. So that, I mean, that's part of it too. And then like how do you perform black? Like what does it look like? So I'm mindful that black people are taught directly or indirectly how to code switch, right? And so for me, code switching is about not being seen as hostile. Like that's my code switch. My code switch is behavioral to not be seen as hostile. So remember that Barack Obama's president, 2 terms, he never got mad one time. He didn't raise his voice. He wasn't cross. He wasn't curt. I'm thinking that he's thinking, if I act a fool, nothing might not happen to me because I got FBI agents around me. But it's going to reaffirm this monolithic falsity that black men are inherently violent or angry, right? And so, how do you perform black, right? So my code switch is never intellectual, because I am an intellectual. I'm going to be no matter what space I'm in. But the ways that I move to not be seen as hostile, I'm mindful of that. So, like all those things to me, if I had to do a formula, it'd be around freedom, around critical consciousness, around performance of blackness, right? And to be pro-black, to me, is all about the love. Like you got to love black. Like it has to be, you know, how you can't be in a space and you feel uncomfortable, right? So because of socioeconomic status, I wasn't rich. I didn't come up with a silver spoon in my mouth, right? So no matter what type of black people I'm around, socioeconomic wise, I'm comfortable, right? Because I mean I got friends and family that are they're challenged, right, as it relates to socioeconomic status. I'm comfortable in that space because I grew up in that space. I just got an education, got a PhD. I'm still most comfortable in that space. But it's just, it's the love for black culture, for black things, for black people. I never look at anything black and look down on it, right? I think that's to be pro-black is to never do that. It's like what Issa Rae said. I'm rooting for everybody black all the time. I'm unashamed with that. And so that's to me, that's what it means to be pro-black. But unfortunately, there's always going to be a response, right? So someone who's not in our culture is going to say, well, if you pro-black, you anti dot dot dot, right? So Black Lives Matter, all lives matter. There's always going to be a response to us loving ourselves. And so it's I'm here for all the smoke around the responses because I'm not going to stop being pro-black.
Yeah, I think it's just a fear. I see it as like this fear when people say, "Oh, you're pro-black." It's a fear of, us. And I've been thinking about it a lot, like, especially in the mornings. I'm like, what would it feel like to be white? Like, I really can't conceptualize it, but I'm like, would I feel like this if I was white? Would I have this like same fear of like somebody loves themselves so much that, they'll wear it on a t-shirt, they'll wear it on a hat, like they'll protest for it. So I've been thinking about that a lot. I've been like, if I was white, would I be like this? And I feel like, and I heard someone else say it, like, I would have that feeling, but I would also have that, be able to be teachable in a way that, like, I see this and I feel this, but also this feeling is not something that I'm comfortable with. But I mean, it's just, you got to stay pro-black. People are always going to hate you. So.
Have you seen Lovecraft? Have you seen Lovecraft Country?
I have.
So you remember episode 5 when the sister, so spoiler alert, when the sister learns how to transform into a white woman.
Yeah.
Like the freedom that she felt by being white, she would go in the stores, didn't have to pay for anything. People never saw her as a threat. They always presumed her as innocent. Like there's the power in living in white skin that we'll never know about it. In that episode 5, they explained it really well.
Yeah. I think that was so important, and that was just like I didn't even see that coming in Lovecraft Country. Like it's just, and also, have you read Black Like Me?
Oh, it's been a while since I read it. Maybe 20 years ago. I might have read it 20 years ago.
Yeah, but I always thought that was interesting where that guy, like, he took that those pills and like tanned his skin, shaved his head so he would be black, so he would look black. It was just so interesting. I was just like, this is just so crazy. But then it's just still he was like, but still he wasn't black because it's like he could just stop taking that medicine and take whatever he had on his skin and become white again. But I thought it was, and especially a part in the book that I thought was so interesting was when he was like, people, especially white men, were so racist to him in the daytime, but at nighttime it was like, that was the easiest time he could get a ride to anywhere. And it was just, and the whole part of it was that they were sexualizing him too. So it was, it was something that I was like, wow, this is like one of the greatest social experiments ever.
Right. But the reason why that experiment was allowed to work is because Black people are loving, right?
Yeah.
So once he said, so because we got a range of hues, right? So we got midnight black, and then we got super light bright, right? That when someone says I'm black, like even Rachel Dolezal, who was born white, right? And wanted to be a Black woman so bad that she transformed her look. She's black like me in the now, right? And Black people embraced and loved and said, okay, we care about you. And even some Black people, after they found out that she wasn't a Black woman, they still, okay, well, you change your name to an African name. So we bring you to the fold, even though you're really not black, you was born white, but you got so much passion for us that you can be Black adjacent. So we bring you into the love and not reject you. And so that's why that works is because Black people are so loving and supportive and caring of people who embrace our culture that it allows for experiments like that to unfurl.
Yeah, and I follow this account on Instagram called Embracing Black Culture, and they had this post about, Black culture is like one of the only cultures that's like, we're gonna invite somebody else of another race to the cookout. We're the only ones that are like, we're gonna invite you to something, because it was like, when have other races invited you to like, insert this event, anything. So it's like we're the ones that are the most embracing. And I follow this other artist, and they did this installation and performance where they invited Rachel Dolezal to braid their hair. And it's just like been this big thing that like she's one of the best hair braiders. And I'm just like, who cares? Who cares?
As my papa used to say, some of us believe that the white man's ice is colder.
Yeah.
And that's an example of, so there are Black women that braid hair out of this world, right? But they probably don't get revered like Rachel Dolezal.
Yeah.
She's a white woman braiding hair, right? That doesn't make her special. The fact that she has learned about how to care for Black hair is important, right? But it doesn't make her better. Her ice isn't colder, right? It's just different. It's a nuance. And so some people are attracted to the nuance.
Yeah. Ugh. It's a whole discussion with there. I don't know what she's doing now, but I do not know what she's doing now. And then to go into that, I already said that one. So also, what are some resources like books, movies, podcasts? I know you also mentioned Lovecraft Country, just different resources that people can use to, be better at being anti-racist, or just books that are, your favorite.
Right. So I'm glad you asked. I had to dig in my library because I was getting ready for this interview. And so here are 4 important ones that I just want to highlight, right? So Ta-Nehisi Coates, Between the World and Me, great read. It's basically a roadmap to his son about how to navigate the geographies of racism. Then you have So You Want to Talk About Race, right, by Olu. Great book for persons who are fearful of having the discussion about race. So because we are Black, it is highly likely that we have conversations about being Black in this world, which some would see as a racialized conversation, but it's not to us because we're Black in the world, right?
Yeah.
But in some racialized groups, they don't really have discussions around race, right? And so that's a great book for that. Then you got this. This is the newest edition, While the Black Kids Sit Together in the Cafeteria, by Beverly Tatum. So she came to Tech before COVID season. And again, this book too is about navigating whiteness and what it looks like, right? So these are all Black authors. And then Olu just released this book here. This is the second book, Mediocre. Woo! About white men. This book right here is a fire starter, right? She probably gonna sell 1 million copies of it. I'm almost through with it because I'm writing my own book too. So I'm almost through with it, and I'm like, this is a really good. What is intriguing to me? So I remember when John Lewis, he did a talk at University of Utah, and so this was maybe 3 years ago. So we flew in for the talk. When Ta-Nehisi came, we flew in for that talk. But in having a conversation with him, I was mindful that he dedicated his entire life to the emancipation of Black people, right? And so just like these authors, and even myself, right? Like we spend an inordinate amount of our life trying to figure out how to not be oppressed, right? And more importantly, how to make our children not oppressed and their children's children who may not even be born not oppressed, right? And so, but because of that, we just get to live. It goes back to the urges of energy. So I could have been, I don't know, I could have been a sanitation worker. I could have been an astronaut. I could have been, a graphic novel designer, right? But I wasn't allowed. So my creative is tied up in race. And so I ponder, like I said, what does it mean to be free in this world, right? And so it's not, my existence is bound by, is my life going to be truncated early? Like that's what it is. In ways that people from other racial groups, they just get to do whatever. They get to create hot air balloon technology. They get to do all these other things, but they're not worried about dying, right? Yeah. And so, all those books, Black History Month, a lot of our greatness is tied to our ability to be resilient in the face of racism. And so those are some resources. I listen to a few podcasts. So I did listen to Lovecraft Country. So NPR has a podcast called Code Switch, which is, there's a man that's an African-American host. And I think his co-host is Indian. She may be Indian.
I think so. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, she's Indian. So they got hot takes about race. You have I'm trying to think, what's the name of the show with Jamel Hill and Carrie Champion?
Is Jamel Hill the one that did Blackish? No, that's not the right guy.
No. Jamel Hill, Tracy Ellis Ross is on Blackish.
Yeah, I thought you were talking about Black AF or.
Oh, Black AF. That's everybody needs to watch that show. Yeah. It is a satire about the real life of a Black man who made it through writing, right? So they went through, what was funny, one of the things that was most impactful to me was that I think he got like 6 kids. Yeah. And so the oldest kids, they remember living in the 1-bedroom apartment. But their younger siblings, they live in a mansion with a maid and a butler and a nanny. And so it's just their conversations around, y'all didn't have a TV in y'all room? Or, it's just funny to me because they grew up in the same house, same parents. And so when he was writing and he hadn't made it yet and they were poor and his wife was just now graduating from law school, they were struggling, right? Yeah. Trying to make it like everyone else. And so it's Black AF. If you got Netflix, yeah, gotta watch that. So there's a lot of this is one show that just came out called Lupin, Lupin, about this Black man. He's I don't know if he's in the UK, but mm-hmm. It's a thriller. It's a thriller about art and creating art and selling it. And so it's different. So there's a lot of resources out there. If you want, my thing is, if you want the most authentic experience about what it means to be Black, talk to somebody that's Black.
Yeah.
Yeah. You can watch all the content you want. It's not going to talk back to you. So talk to somebody that's Black.
Yeah. That's so good. And I haven't read any of those books that you mentioned either. And somebody talked about posting them. So we'll post a list of those. You can send out an email and make a Facebook infographic about it too. So,
Right.
and then also, I know we didn't talk about it. So from your perspective, for you, what's it like being Black? And I think I know you live in Wolford, but it's Lubbock.
Right. Yeah. Lubbock is,
So
it's,
Lubbock County, West
right. Lubbock
Texas.
County.
How's it like being Black living in Lubbock?
Oh, so being Black living in Lubbock is, so Texas, so you have Houston, metropolis, right? Third largest city in the country, I think, population wise. Uh, but you also have like Dallas, and then you got San Antonio, right? So you got all these cultural epicenters that are totally different, right? And Lubbock, being Black in Lubbock is the irony is that my ancestors, I literally work in a cotton field. Like I hadn't when I first got here, I was like Lubbock. I was like, what is that cotton? It was the first time that I'd ever seen some of it. Right. I remember when we were driving to Oklahoma. I told everybody in my car, get out and pick some cotton in honor of our ancestors who had to pick it. We have the luxury of picking it if we want to. Right. And it's not connected to our lives being lost. Right. And so it was being here is cathartic in a sense that I'm mindful that my Blackness, everyone who has met me as Dr. Hotchkins. So I'm in a different space and place, right? When people meet me. And so it is, man, it depends on where I'm at in Lubbock or with whom I'm speaking. Like because of COVID, it's just totally, COVID has changed the world for everyone, right? And so I don't interact with people like I used to. I probably won't get back to interacting until after I take this, Johnson & Johnson one-shot vaccine. So probably 2023, I'll get back to being normal with folks, And so it is, being in Lubbock, it is the pacing of Lubbock is way different than Salt Lake City, Oklahoma City, right? Like there's not this ongoing pacing of keep up with the Joneses, of be materialistic, of you got to do more than what you know you can to prove your worth. Like all that, I don't experience those pressures in Lubbock. It's which is refreshing. That's why I like Oklahoma City. If I had an opportunity to be in Los Angeles, Miami, or New York, I absolutely would not be there because there's too many people, and I'm just I like less. Less is more, and so it is. Lubbock is coming here. Mark the beginning of the ascent of my career, right? Mm-hmm. In a sense, we went to Salt Lake City, got our degrees, so it prepared us, right? So I was telling Pastor Stubblefield the other day, I'm glad that my famine came before my feast, right? So we went to graduate school, and then we struggled in graduate school. Now, anybody want to go to graduate school, I'm telling them, be a research assistant because they're going to socialize you how to be a professor, but they only going to pay you $1,100 a month. And that's what I made for 5 straight years, $1,100 a month. And so, but it prepared me for my ascent. So when we came here, now as a professor, it is the realization of the dreaming, right? So as we have conversations about dreamscapes all the time. And what happens when you write down all the things you wanted to do and you do them all, right? Like then you're caught in, I have to dream again, right? Like you have to dream, you have to delve into the dreamscape again about what you want to be next, right? You can't stop or be stagnant in, I achieved all these things. You have to continue to dream, right? And that's the phase that we in now. I never would have thought that creating, our how to reverse racism trainings or me creating. So prior to COVID, I do the Facade podcast. I was developing, I had an opportunity to do it live where I took Kendrick Lamar's Damn album and we dissected the lyrics and applied them to how to college students navigate racism on college campuses, right? And so it's all those things I hadn't dreamt of those things, right? I just I wanted to dream. I want to get this PhD. That was the dream. And once I got it, I had to dream again. And so I feel like the world is happening to me, right? And I'm responding because I've been prepared in my famine. I was prepared to get this feast. And so now the feast is looking great because now I'm touching the feast to me is watching people have epiphany moments when they say, Dr. Hotchkins, I never thought about that. And after they do, they change the way that they live. Whew, like that to me, that's the feast. For me, it's not about material things. It's about touching people's souls. Not literally, but metaphorically touching people's souls in ways that change the arc of their lives. Well, not because I didn't tell them to do this. They had the epiphany and said, I'm going to do this. And so I love that. I love being in the space that I'm in now.
Yeah, that's a great feeling. And it's better than like any like gold or silver, I think. It's just, and it's something that sticks with you for so long too, so. And so then if you want to talk more, we have a few more minutes and I'll look and see if we have any questions about your book that you have coming out. And then also if you want to mention the launch date, what you have going on, the content of it.
Okay. So the book is entitled, My Black is Exhausted, Forever in Pursuit of a Racist-Free World Where Hashtags Don't Exist. Right. And so initially, I remember my son asking me, Daddy, what's your greatest fear? And I said, my greatest fear is becoming a hashtag, right? Because I associated Black men's lives as hashtag with they've been killed, right? And so it got me to thinking about the last 10 years. So I got on Twitter in 2010, right? And now it's 2021. And so what the book does is it chronicles from 2010 to 2021, 4 things that relate to hashtags, right? So it chronicles Black excellence. So how did Black people chronicle? So basically, social media is a digital griot for Black life, right? How do we chronicle our Black excellence, right? How do we chronicle, how are we allowed to use social media to mourn, right? So we chronicle the loss of Black life, right? But we also use social media to bring us together, right? So I've seen people that would tweet and they would mobilize. So for it's Black people in 10 cities on 10 different streets in the country or globally marching together, right? And as we've seen, because we have Karens calling the police because Black people outside, we use social media to validate our voices, right? What people would have said, I would have said, I was at the post office and I was trying to get stamps and somebody accused me of stealing stamps and I videoed it, right? Because otherwise, if I'd have told you that story, you might not have believed it. You'd have been like, somebody called the police on you because you were trying to get stamps. Like you wouldn't have believed it. So we use social media to validate our voices. So those are the 4 things that the book covers and my perspective about all those things, right? And the role that hashtags play. Like 20 years from now, we're gonna look back on the power of Black Twitter, right? So when Black people shut you down, you shut down. Like our spending power, when we curtail the spending power, it's going to be followed by your company doing a public service announcement about, why we did something wrong. I remember when Starbucks was like, yeah, we support Black lives. And then they sent the email to everybody saying, y'all can't wear no Black Lives Matter stuff in our stores. And then somebody Black had that email and was like, look, this is what they said about us. They don't really feel this way. And Black Twitter was on them. And so what follows that? President talking, the CEO talking. Well, I'm sorry, we misconstrued, we this, we that, right? And so people are getting canceled. Cancel culture is part of that, right? And so that's what the arc of the book is. And so it's a historic timeline, digitally marked by hashtags about how Black people have experienced the last 11 years. And so when I did my research, I was like, no book has done this before. And so I want my book to do this, right? And so it should debut in the summer of 2021, right? Because so one thing that for all of you authors out there, when you deal with publishers, I don't know how many of y'all grew up doing double dutch. So I grew up with Black girls on my bus stop doing like this with 2 ropes waiting for the bus to come. And you had to figure out, first you had to get permission from them to let you jump in the double dutch. And then you had to figure out, how do I do it? It's about timing, right? So you would like time, and then you jump in and do your thing. And so that's kind of how the publishing process is. So we're looking for a summer release date. I'm looking forward to it, but you can go to the website, which is www.mbiebook.com, which is short for My Black is Exhausted book.com. And so you can pre-order it now. And we got merch on there. So we got some t-shirts on there. So you can pre-order the book to make sure that you get it. And so, because I'll be signing, everybody purchases one, I'm definitely going to sign it. Right. And so that first run, I don't know how fast it's going to sell out. And I don't know how quickly they're going to print more. So I encourage people, pre-order it now. So when it comes, it's reserved and it's good for you.
Awesome. Definitely. I'll definitely have to get a book too and we have a community library at the art house. And so we might get some more shelves because we're running out of space. So we'll definitely put some on there. Because we have, and I feel like a lot of like people, it's been mostly kids getting like comic books and manga or whatever. So we need some adults to come out and actually get some of the books by Black authors that I like spend so much money getting. So definitely, come by and check out that. We'll need to put your book in that, and I'll check we didn't have any questions. Also, someone mentioned grad school equals abject poverty. That makes sense.
It does. But here's the thing, that abject poverty is only temporary. Yeah. Like that I knew going there that I would be in famine mode, right? Because I had a job. I was working at the Oklahoma State Regent's office. And so, but I realized, here's the epiphany I had. My boss said, I need you to go to this meeting, right? And because I can't go. And so I went to the meeting. I was sitting down. Everybody had a PhD but me, right? And I practiced. I was like, okay, I'm writing this down. This is going to be my point. I'm going to jump in with this point. So I jumped in with the point, and everybody looked at me like, why is he talking? And then somebody in the group, in the room, they remixed my point right in front of me. They'd hit it, the DJ Khaled, they was like, and another one. They remixed it and said it over, and everybody loved it. And in real time, I was like, what? That's the same thing I said, but different. And I left that meeting saying, I'm never gonna feel like that again. Mm-hmm. So, and that began the journey for me of saying, I gotta get this PhD. So yes, graduate school, if you're a research assistant, you're gonna have some famine, right? But let me tell you, after that, it's all feasts. Rest of your life is feast for the small time of famine, for sure.
That's good. And that's good inspiration, and I definitely need that. And then someone also mentioned that the South Plains College Levelland Library has all the books except for one of them, and you can go and check out them. You don't have to be a student there. You just have to make an account online, and you can check out the books anytime. So that's really good to know as well, because I did not know that. I also have a late fee at every library in Texas, so that's good. Another library that I can go to and not return
a book. That's a good fee to have.
Oh, cool. Is there anything else you'd like to mention? I know we didn't want to keep anyone and keep you over an hour. So is there anything else you want to talk about, or anything that's going on in the area? Or
I wanted to tell you thank you for the opportunity to come and speak during Black History Month. It is everything that I've ever done that was successful has been connected to a Black woman. And so I appreciate the work that you do. Thank you. Once this COVID season lifts and we get these vaccines and some people that had a chance to read the book, I definitely want to come do some type of fundraising, event at your spot, and we can get some, I'm big on literacy, right? I'm mindful that I've seen some studies that says if a child grows up in a house where neither parent has a college degree, and a child grows up in a house where two parents, but both parents have a college degree, by the time those children are 5, the child that has parents with the college degree has heard or been exposed to 1 million more words.
Wow.
1 million. Yeah, 1 million. And so I'm big on literacy, right? Reading is, I hate to take the line, but reading is fundamental. Like it is fundamental, right? And so it's, that's what I want to say. If you are in this city or you know someone that you think needs diversity, equity, or inclusion training, or they want to move from not racist to anti-racist, look me up, give us a call, because we are here to transform to create the situation where people transform their own lives, right? I don't transform lives. I transform organizational climates, right? But to transform the lives of people, because ultimately we want to be in a world that's safe. At the end of the day, when I retire, I want people to say that Dr. Hotchkins' research made the world safer, right? And so, yeah, I thank you for the opportunity. I appreciate you. And all the people that watched, thank them. I thank them for watching, and for coming out. I wish they had some questions, but
we have
okay.
one question from Pat. It's saying, have you ever read Fearing the Black Body by Strings, and what did you think about it?
I have not read Fearing the Black Body. Yeah. But I got an idea what it's about. It's about my lived experience of people fearing my black body for no reason at all, right? No previous data about. So not only is racism nonsensical, right? It damages people, and so I'm mindful that there's no reason. I've never not interacted with a group of people and had deficit perspectives about them and been afraid of them and wanted to erase them. It's just racism is just nonsensical. It doesn't. I grapple with it. I'm not a big person. I'm like 5'8", 215. I'm not menacing, right? But I'm mindful that because I'm cloaked in black skin, that people can see me as menacing, right? And so it's just, I haven't read that book, but I got an idea what it's about.
Good. So I guess we can end it out for tonight. Thank you so much. And thanks for just being here, for giving all this knowledge. The comments are like full. I need this video. So definitely go back and check it. And I'll see what everybody else wrote. I know people put a lot of things. Some people wrote paragraphs. So I'll go back and definitely check that out. And then
how do I check it? How do I check the
and y'all can, anyone that's going to go back, you can just look on the East Lubbock Art House Facebook page, and underneath the videos, it should be available for rewatching, and you can check the comments there if you click comment. So, and then you can share it from there, rewatch it, and then we'll send out a link through our email list, and I think I can post it on YouTube as well, so I'll try that this week. Okay. But good. Thanks for being here. This has been amazing. And definitely check out next week. We'll have Stuart Williams, who's a local, and he's also working with voter registration, voter rights, and basically the political scene in West Texas. So definitely got to check that out. It should be good.
Okay, we'll do.
Cool. Okay. Y'all have a good night.
Okay, you too. Thank you again.